Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rob Shmuel, with you with this week's 10-minute Torah. And for those of you that are keeping score, there's my yarmulke. Okay, I have different yarmulkes I wear at different times. Kind of like to be fashionable, and this one's a little bit smaller, but yeah, I like it. I like it. So, okay, so hope you all had a great New Year's celebration with the high holidays. And this is actually my favorite time of the year. I know I've mentioned that my favorite season is summer, which I do. But for me, and maybe for you too, and this is why I mention it, the high holidays is a very special time. It is the transition from summer to fall. It is a new year and we get to take stock of ourselves. It's a lot of fun holidays. People think I'm crazy when I mention Yom Kippur as a fun holiday, but I kind of like it. I like immersing in the spirituality. This year, I kind of did double duty as rabbi and cantor during the high holidays, and I enjoy it. I love doing that. That's why I became a rabbi. To me, just being immersed in those beautiful tunes and in the praying, it kind of does something. It just kind of gives you just a great feeling. So, and I really, my goal when I do services, any services, especially the high holidays, is to impart and facilitate spirituality and meaningfulness and spiritual fullness centered around our wonderful religion of Judaism. So for me, it's just a real beautiful time. Okay, so let's talk about our. I'm just kind of looking at the timer. I had forgotten to set a timer for myself. So sorry, but I'm doing that right now. I don't want to. I like to keep these about 10. I call these 10-minute Torahs, but most of you know that, quite frankly, um, they're 11 minutes, so it's a little bit of a misnomer, but it is what it is, right? Okay, so before we talk about Bereishit, and we've gone to the end of Deuteronomy, Simchat Torah, and we've gone ahead, read the end of Deuteronomy, end of the Torah, and we have rolled it back to Genesis, and we read some of Genesis, the first chapter, which is creation, and then the first few verses of chapter 2, which is about Shabbat. And we start over again. We start looking at it, and every year we look at something different. And I'm going to tell you about something I kind of noticed this year. I enjoy reading the Torahs. I've got 3 Chumishes. I've got the Eitz Chaim, which is the newest conservative. I've got the Art Scroll, which is the Orthodox, which a lot of people seem to like. And by the way, if you get a chance, if you're in Tustin, go to the Golden Dreidel. They have all that. They have it in Hebrew and English. They have it in Spanish and Hebrew. So it's very nice. And most of what they have is Art Scroll. People seem to like it because it gives a really nice, concise, and meaningful and sort of all-encompassing commentary to the various portions and everything. This year, I'm also my own personal preference, and I like to rotate. I'm doing the Hertz, which is the Sansino edition, which is what I grew up with. It was edited by Rabbi Joseph Hertz, a former chief rabbi of the British Empire, and I kind of like his commentary. It's very personal because it's the first Chumash I read. Okay, so enough of that stuff. Before we get into Bereishit, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is this idea of Parshas and reading Parshas every day. All right. So, what is the halacha? What is the mitzvah of reading the Torah? The only mitzvah we have in the Torah about reading the Torah is that every 7 years, during the Shemitah year, specifically during the Shemitah year, when the land is fallow and the land gets a rest, so basically nobody has anything to do. So what do? When they make their pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the first of the pilgrimage festivals, which in our calendar are spiritual New Year's in Tishrei, so it's Sukkot, and they sit around for 7 days and they listen to the king read part of Deuteronomy. That's it. That's the commandment. Now, later on, when the temple was destroyed and the Hebrew scriptures was, I guess the word is canonized, We've had the Torah written down between the first and second temple, but after the second temple, or during the second temple, it was Ezra and Nehemiah that actually put together the Hebrew Bible. Actually, I don't think that's true. I believe that it was done after the destruction of the second temple, right before they actually sat down with the Talmud and wrote that. Because remember, that was the oral law. And they were afraid that without a temple, without a central location for Jews to be or to live, with Jews spread out among the diaspora, Judaism was going to devolve into a bunch of cults. And maybe over in Eastern Europe, they were going to do things differently than, in the Spanish Iberian Peninsula, for example. So they wanted to make sure it was all standardized and people understand the laws. So they wrote down the oral Torah. And they realized that without a temple, they had to create or reinvent, reimagine Judaism for Jews that are spread out and there is no temple. So after a while, and I believe it was Maimonides around the 1200s is the one that said, okay, we're going to go through a 3-year period. I believe it was a 3-year period that we're going to read the Torah through the course of 3 years. And then later on, it became a yearly reading. And when they did that, they had to divide the Torah up into parshas. The Torah was just one big scroll. So one of the comments that Rabbi Hertz makes is that in Bereishit, isn't it weird that the first chapter is all about creation and then the second chapter begins with Shabbat? But you can kind of see that because because the idea of a rest was revolutionary. Nobody rested. People didn't have a day off. They just kept working. So this was a great way, so people could recharge their week and get back in. And because a lot of what they were doing was very physical labor. You get tired. In Judaism, you got to be fruitful and multiply. Well, if you're too tired to be fruitful and multiply, there goes the propagation of the species, right? Or of the people. Okay, so ultimately, services centered around, or Saturday morning, Shabbat morning services centered around the idea of reading the Torah. And, we had different times when we read the Torah. I believe it was, in fact, Ezra that said that we should be reading the Torah Saturday afternoon as well. So all of this became standardized. The idea that we read the Torah 3 times during the weeks, Shabbat afternoon, Monday and Thursday morning, 3 aliyot, unless it's an intermediate day, then it's 4. If it's a Rosh Chodesh, a new month day, it's also 4 readings. The festivals and the holidays of Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot, 5 readings, Yom Kippur 6, and during Shabbat it was 7, or as many as you want, which is also Simchat Torah. So later on, the conservative movement came and said, well, I'm presuming, maybe wrongly so, that since they felt that, well, it initially started with a 3-year cycle, and 3 is a Jewish number of strength, then let's divide the Torah into cycles. And the first year cycle, we read the first part of a parsha. The second year, which is what we're in now, 5784 is triennial-year cycle. We read the middle part of it, and then 5785 we'll be reading the third. There are some exceptions where the parshas are a little bit longer. It's not a third, maybe it's more, because it contains a part that's very, very important. See? So this became kind of a standardized. So it's really kind of a modern invention. Modern, if you go back to the Middle Ages. There are some synagogues that read the minimum number of verses that the rabbis deem, which is 3. 3 verses, and you're good, and you have an aliyah, and that's all you need. So some synagogues will call up 7 people, they'll read 3 verses, and good to go. All right. So that's kind of the way the system goes. So of course we want to stick with a tradition. We want to do the minchag. We want to make sure that when people walk into the synagogue, they know what to expect. So that's a little bit of history. Okay, so this week's portion of Bereishit, or this year's portion, centers around Adam and Eve being tempted by the serpent. Notice I said Adam and Eve, not just Eve. Adam was in it, was involved in it too. He ate, he knew. Hey, he was minding the store, right? He knew all the trees. He knew what he was eating. Come on. That woman that you gave me this. Come on, Adam, who are you fooling? We know better. Okay. But what's really interesting is the story of Cain and Abel. So within the second generation, the angels warned God. They said, don't create humans. Within the first generation, or should we say the second generation after Adam and Eve, we have murder, which is pretty sad, but it happened. Man, we were created flawed, so we'd have something to do. According to Kabbalah, the idea of life is to grow. So Abel and Cain both present offerings to Hashem. Abel is a shepherd, so he's the wool for clothes, I guess, because they weren't eating animals at that point. He presents the finest of his flock. Cain just slops together some vegetables he was making. He was farming and throws them down, and God's like, sorry, Cain, that's not going to cut it. And then God says to Cain, why are you so upset? You can do better next time. And, don't make yourself better, basically. Learn from it and do better. Don't get involved in sin. If you read that passage in chapter 4, and I believe it was verse 14, you will see what God says. God is basically counseling him and saying, look, don't get too upset. Try better next time. That's all you got to do. Cain, unfortunately, didn't take God's advice to heart. And we see what happened. He got jealous of Abel. He slew him, and God banished him from the Garden of Eden. So, and banished them from the garden because they were already outside the garden. So we just said, you're going to wander. You're not going to live in one place. Why didn't God exact capital punishment? The rabbis say that because Cain actually repented. He felt bad about what he did. He was impulsive. And that's why God said, don't devolve into sin. Okay, so we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. We will see you at services. We're going to have a great year. We've got a little membership drive going on in our synagogue. And we want everybody to get involved. And as usual, we're starting out a new year, 5784. Something you like, let me know. Something you don't like, let me know. Let's do something great. Okay. Shabbat shalom, everybody, and thank you for